When we're learning about how to be in this world, it doesn't occur to us that whatever we're learning can be understood differently. Right? What I'm going to do is talk to you today about this concept of mindlessness and show you that basically we're sealed in unlived lives, and it's important to break the seals that keep us from actually experiencing all that we could experience. I went into a store to make a purchase, and I gave the cashier my credit card. She saw that the credit card wasn't signed, so she asked me to sign it. I signed it. She then ran it through the credit card machine and gave me the credit card slip and asked me to sign it. I signed it. She then compared the two signatures. If they didn't match, it would have been funny. Right. What was interesting to me about this, though, was that she was completely oblivious to the fact that this made little sense. And then I started to think about it. And I realized that basically when you're not there to know that you're not there. Right? And my argument is that we're not there most of the time. Right? Now you have lots of pop psychology that tells you be in the moment. And that's very nice, be in the moment. The problem is when you're not in the moment, you're not there to know you're not there. So I'm going to show you how to be there. Now, the consequences of being mindless can be innocuous, as with the credit card, or they can be quite severe. So many years ago, a flight was leaving from Washington, D.C., going to Florida. So that's one warm location to another. The pilot and co-pilot go through their checklist. Flaps up, throttle open, anti-ice off. And this day, it happened to be snowing. So with the anti-icer mindlessly turned off, the plane crashed and people were killed. All right, so the consequences can be rather severe. Now, again, what's interesting, and if there's anybody here in the healthcare field or in aviation, that we put in checklists, again, for safety. And I've done a lot of flying recently, and so I'm very aware when they give you that form, and did you bring in livestock, and I don't know what else comes, you just know the answer is no. And you just go down the list. All right, so checklists are not the answer. Okay, so we've got to figure out what the answer is. And I'm going to argue that this is logically true, that no matter what you're doing, no matter what, you're giving a talk, listening to a talk, writing a report, playing golf, no matter what it is, you're doing it either mindfully or mindlessly. And the consequences of being in one state of mind or the other are enormous. Now, I'm an academic, so I say most because it's in print. Just among us, all. A very big statement. All of our suffering, individual, group, country, is directly or indirectly a function of our mindlessness. So for over 30 years, what I've done is I would make people, groups, whatever, more mindful, and we take measures, one thing or the other. And what we find, I'm going to show you some of these in a moment, is that there are measurable benefits to our competence, to our health. We even live longer. So we're happier, we're healthier, we're better in all ways by simply being more mindful. Here are just some of the things that we've looked at. I stopped because I didn't want to use another slide. All right, so what is this mindfulness? It is so silly, so simple, that it almost defies belief. All you need to do is notice new things. That's it. You notice new things. When you notice new things, that's going to put you in the present. Right? That's going to make you aware that things vary depending on context and perspective. You can still have rules and routines, but these rules and routines should guide what you're doing. Right now, for too many people, our goals, rules, routines overly determine what we're going to be doing. When I talk to you about decision-making, we'll come back to this, and you'll see how pointless using these rules and routines mindlessly can be. The experience of this mindfulness is the experience of engagement. As you're noticing, you get literally and figuratively enlivening, and you'll see that. Now, I'm operating, let's say I just came back from London, from Los Angeles, Boston, and now here. I have no idea what time it is. All I know is that I haven't slept. And what you will see presumably, if I do this mindfully, is I will become more energized rather than less. Mindfulness is energy begetting, right? And with the list of consequences that result from it, it's hard for me to understand that once you understand, all you need to do to be mindful is notice new things and see how life-changing that is, that any of you would not do it as often as you possibly could. When you're mindless, in contrast, you're basically on automatic pilot. Again, you're oblivious to the fact that you're not really there. The past is over-determining the present. All right? You're not there to make use of current information. Everything is dictated by what was true before. You're trapped in a single perspective. You're insensitive to context. Now, rules and routines govern. Okay? And it typically happens by default, not by design. All right, so far we can say mindlessness is pervasive. Basically, we think we know, we seek certainty, and that's the problem. And it leads us to be frequently in error, but rarely in doubt. Doubt is a positive thing, but we tend to run from it. And the certainty we have about anything is illusory. There's an overwhelming tendency to confuse the stability of our mindsets with the stability of the underlying phenomena. Things are changing. You want to hold it still in your head? Do so. But in fact, you'll end up with more control over your personal and work lives by letting it vary. Okay, so no matter what you're doing, whether it's as people, as leaders, at work or play, that if you allow yourself to do it mindfully, you'll experience enormous advantages. Okay, so now, some of the things that are kind of fun is that not only does this mindfulness improve our performance, makes us aware of accidents before it happens, feels good being mindful, leads us to be innovative, our mindfulness is actually visible to other people. More reason to be mindful because you're going to be found more attractive. All right, so we did this study a while ago where we had trainers of dolphins. They were going to be in the water. The dolphin would be released, and we want to time how long does it take the dolphin to swim to the trainer, how long does the dolphin stay with the trainer. Now, the trainer, half of the trainers are instructed to be mindful, half to be mindless. So when they're instructed to be mindless, they're told, while you're in the water, be thinking of all the facts you're certain of with respect to dolphins. Everything you know about dolphins, just keep telling yourself. When they're mindful, they're told, we want you to be thinking about how this dolphin is different from the other dolphins, and how this dolphin today is different from the way the dolphin was the last time you interacted with it. All right, so one is focused on the familiar, the so-called certainties. The other is dealing with change and novelty. Need I tell you, but once the dolphin is released, they swim faster and they stay longer when the trainer is mindful. Okay, it's not just dolphins. People know whether or not we're there. So John Savloka at the business school and I, many years ago, did this very simple study. We had salesmen that were going to be selling magazines, and they were going to be selling them mindfully or mindlessly. When the mindless group was given a script, and they were told, learn the script so you know it by heart, and then just go and make the sale. The mindful people were given the script, and they were told, in addition to this, or as you're doing it, make it new in very subtle ways. Okay? Subtle ways that only you would know. They go out, they sell the magazines, then somebody else comes and speaks to the people to whom they've just sold or didn't make the sale, and asks them to evaluate the salesperson. And what happens is that, most important for our concerns now, is that the person is evaluated as charismatic when they make it new in very subtle ways. When you're there, people find you appealing. When you're there, people trust you and enjoy your company. When you're there, you're going to enjoy yourself. All right? And if there are any salespeople in the audience, they also sold more magazines. Now, women have a special problem with respect to leadership. And I think we saw some of it when Hillary Clinton was running for office. That if a woman acts womanly, then she's seen as sort of weak and not able to be a successful leader. If, on the other hand, she acts like a man, she's taken, am I allowed to curse up here? Okay, she's seen as a bitch, basically. So what is she to do? She's either too weak for the job, or she's not the kind of person you want to give the job to. So what we did was we took women, and we had them be manly, or lovely women, and they were going to be mindful or mindless. So you're mindful and womanly, manly, mindless, womanly, manly, all right? And then we have them addressing audiences and the like. And what happens is we find that when she's mindful, it doesn't matter whether she is more womanly or more masculine, okay? Being there is appealing. Okay, so my argument is that this charisma is the essence of effective leadership, and it's simply a function of this mindlessness, which is simply noticing new things. It defies belief to me. But when you think about from the very beginning how you were taught absolutes and how you memorized facts, for example, in school, and you recognize how the whole world is geared to holding things still, then this simple idea of realizing that things vary. They vary over time and they look different from different perspectives. And when we allow them to vary, we actually have more control over them. Interestingly, our mindfulness is even visible in the products we produce. I'm going to be a little narcissistic because I've got the control. Why not? All right, so I started painting about 10 years ago. And what would happen is I would paint, I don't know what I'm doing, and you can see that there's nothing that's accurate about this painting. But I love it. All right, now, I would paint, I would have some experience, I would then be a psychologist again, do the research to see if it was true just for me, then I'd be painting and, and so on, and I still to this day do this. And one of the things that I was curious about was, does our mindfulness leave its imprint on the products we produce? All I knew about this was that I put my whole self into it. All right. So we have several of these. I have many I'm not going to show you, just so you get... And they're all psychologically rich. So here he's playing, it looks like dominoes. I meant it to be solitaire, but there are two others there. Why is he playing alone? Very weighty. This is a Greyhound bus being driven by Jack Russell. Okay, maybe just one more. Do you know the Shar-Pei, the wrinkle dog? This is before and after surgery. So I'm clearly having a good time with this. And you see he's skinny over there but muscular in the mirror. And the question is our mindfulness on the canvas, or is it simply in the eye of the beholder? And I want to argue both. So we do lots of studies. I'm just going to give you the simplest. So we have people draw, copy it again. Other subjects, draw, copy it, but this time make it new in very subtle ways that only you would know. Then we mix them all together, and we have people tell us which ones they prefer. People overwhelmingly prefer the mindfully drawn drawings, the ones where they made it new. And we have this in several different kinds of studies. Now, I make this painting. It's very interesting to me. I dip the paintbrush into what I think is this yellowy color, but I actually dipped it into that magenta color. I look up, oh my God. I take a paper towel and I quickly try to erase it. And then I'm the psychologist, and I say, what's going on here? Here is a circumstance where it makes absolutely no difference what color I'm using, but having made a decision and then violated that decision, it feels like something tremendous has happened. Now, this is important with respect to decision making. Whenever we're making a decision, that means there's uncertainty. If there's no uncertainty, there's no decision. The second we make the decision, we tend to act as if, that particular alternative was given to us from the heavens or something, that it could be no other way. Right? So there's something else. I'm going to take an extra minute or two to tell you. This is kind of fun for me. I asked a friend of mine, before that dog over there was in the picture, I said, which cabinet should I get rid of because I want to put, Girlie was her name, in the painting. She says, get rid of the cabinet over the stove because you would never have a cabinet over a stove. And I said, but when would you have a dog doing dishes? But the meaning behind that, there's actually something to think about, because when something hasn't been, we're all sure it can't be. Mistakenly sure. As soon as something is, we immediately assimilate what we're seeing, and leaves us not feeling many surprises. Okay, so the fact that the dog was doing dishes was already a natural sort of thing in that example. Anyway, I use this as an instance about mistakes. So I want to argue that if you make a mistake, first of all, that's good, because that means you've been mindless. And you're mindless most of the time anyway, whether you're making a mistake or not. Now, if you make a mistake and you go forward and incorporate that mistake into what you're doing, then what you're doing will be mindful. So we have three groups. One group that's not going to make a mistake. One group that we give the pablum that we tend to tell each other. It's human to err. Just forgive yourself if you make a mistake. And the important group is told, if you make a mistake, incorporate the mistake into what you're doing. The cabinets, in other words, in that painting, I liked better because I took the time to notice them with that mistake. Okay, so you all understand what I'm suggesting so far. That if we make, now this was a hard thing, how do I get people to make a mistake? So what we did was have everybody fill out a form, and they were asked, what did you have for breakfast? So everybody writes down 5 or 6 things they had for breakfast. Then, depending on the study, because some of them they're writing, some they're drawing, we say to them, we want you to, say, draw about morning. Okay, halfway through, then they're given a questionnaire, and the questionnaire says to them, we know it's hard to think about loss and grief. Okay, so by priming breakfast, they're thinking AM, M-O-R-N-I-G. But now they learn that we are asking them to draw or write about mourning, as in grief, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G. All right? And from that point, then, they'll either forgive themselves or they'll incorporate it and go forward. And what we find is that those who incorporated the mistake and went forward produced drawings and essays that were rated as superior even to those where there was no mistake made. And they enjoyed the process more. Okay, we behave mindlessly oftentimes because we're afraid to make mistakes, because we forget that almost all that is was, again, just a decision. A mistake is a cue to be in the present. Mistakes often make the products that we're doing more interesting. We need mistakes because that reveals opportunities that we otherwise would be oblivious to. And a mistake in one context can be a success in another. Now, here's a little cue as to how to be innovative. So the CEO is producing this glue, and all his money involved in producing the glue. And it turns out the glue fails to adhere. Oh my goodness, what a terrible mistake. However, what he did was take advantage of the property, failure to adhere, and created Post-it notes. Okay, a multi-billion-dollar business. Is it a success? Well, as a Post-it note, yes. As a glue, it's a failure. Now, so if you do something and it fails, the better thing is not to say I have a glue that fails to adhere, but to say to yourself, I have a glue that adheres for a short amount of time. And then it will be easier to generate things you might do with such a product. This person has a defogger, sprays all the crops in Florida, but what happened is it produced an icy, snowy substance that ended up killing the crops. Again, a terrible failure. Somebody else took that very same machine, spray the slopes in New England when people want to ski, but there's no snow. Very successful, right? As a defogger, it was a failure. As a snowmaker, it was a big success. This is the one that's most relevant, these studies on music. Now, I don't know how many orchestra musicians you know, but these are people who generally have for them a high-status job, but they're bored to death. They're playing the same music over and over and over again. So what we do is we take these musicians and we divide them into one of two groups. And we simply tell them, remember a performance you gave of whichever the piece that they're going to play, and try to replicate that performance. The mindful group is told, make it new in very subtle ways that only you would know. And this is important because these people are playing classical music. They're not playing jazz. So it had to indeed be subtle. All right, what we do is we tape the performances, and we're going to play them for people and see which they prefer. And we also question the musicians to see which they enjoyed playing more. What we find is the audience overwhelmingly prefers the mindfully played piece, and the musicians prefer playing it mindfully. All they're doing is being there for the performance by making it new in subtle ways. Now, there's a hidden finding in this that I didn't realize when I designed the study. It wasn't until I wrote it up that this speaks volumes to leadership. Here we have a situation where everybody is essentially doing their own thing. You might assume that chaos would reign, but instead, you end up with superior group performance. Another myth that we have about leadership is, or just in general, that we think evaluations of people make sense. You know, we have people who are better than other people. And what happens is that means that we have to take certain kinds of care in the ways we lead. I want to suggest something very different, and that this difference you use not just at work, but in all your interactions. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know, today I'm going to be bigoted, I'm going to be obnoxious, I'm going to be clumsy, or whatever else we call people. What are they intending from their perspective? Behavior makes sense from the actor's perspective, or else the actor wouldn't do it. Now, what does that mean? That means you want me to stop being impulsive? I don't want to be impulsive. I look back at my behavior. Oh my goodness, I was impulsive. I keep trying not to be impulsive, but you know what happens is I keep failing. Why? Because going forward, from my perspective, I'm not being impulsive, I'm being spontaneous. You want me to stop being so rigid? From my perspective, I'm not being rigid, I'm being stable, consistent, the kind of person you can count on. Now, if you play this through, and you assume that whatever a person is doing makes sense from their perspective, you become far less evaluative and judgmental. And the nice thing is, then you also, over time, become less judgmental of yourselves. So we gave people, for example, 300 of these rigid descriptions. And they were told, circle those things that you want to change about yourself. So I would circle impulsive, for instance. Then they turn it over, and in a mixed-up order are the positive versions of each of these traits or behaviors. Now we ask them, circle those things you value about yourself. Spontaneity. All right? So the very things I have trouble changing are the things that I actually value in myself from a different perspective. So it actually is very simple to change behavior. If you want me to stop being impulsive, all you need to do is persuade me to stop being spontaneous. And my guess is when you see it this way, you'll be less interested in changing my behavior. So we take these two facts, the fact that if everybody does it their own way, you may end up with superior coordinated experience, and you add that to people's behavior makes sense, which makes us less evaluative. In fact, it sets us up to actually learn from the people that we're leading. What that ends up meaning is that the major job that we have as leaders may be to increase people's mindfulness. Now, I'm going to move into health in a moment to show you just how astounding increasing mindfulness may be. And I want to suggest that almost everything you know may be wrong. All right? Things are constantly changing. They look different from different perspectives. We're constantly confusing the stability of our mindsets with the stability on the underlying phenomenon. When we open it all up, it's easier to consider new ideas, and that's what I'm going to ask you to do now. Some of these are in my most recent book. All right, I'm going to talk about the psychology of possibility. When we realize that there's much we don't know about our health, we tend to be overwhelmed and take it as negative. But what we ought to take away is that this realization opens up a world of possibility to us. What is the psychology of possibility? It's a study of what might be rather than a description of what is. Why are we so sure we can't improve vision beyond 2020? Think ourselves thin. Reverse virtually all brain damage. Why are we sure we can't run a company or a nation where everyone prospers? We need to free ourselves from constricting mindsets and the limits they place on us. Possibility opens up when we recognize the difference between uncontrollable and indeterminate. This is very important, that especially with respect to health, one can never prove uncontrollable. It doesn't matter if you're doing an experiment in psychology, in physics, biology, you can never prove uncontrollable. You can only say, gee, we don't know. This doesn't seem to be the way. Now that's very different from it can't be. Because when you believe something can't be, then you feel foolish trying to make it be. When you say, well, we're not sure whether or not it can be, more reason to go forward. Now, in the early studies, what I was doing was giving people these increases in mindfulness, and we got all those nice findings, not the least of which is an increase in longevity. In the recent studies, what I'm going to talk to you about is reversing some of these mindless ideas regarding health. Okay, so I'm at a horse event. This man asked me would I watch his horse because he wanted to go get his horse a hot dog. I'm Harvard, Yale all the way through. I say to myself, so as not to be mean, what is he, crazy? Horses are herbivorous. They don't eat meat. He gets the hot dog. He comes back with the hot dog. He gives the horse the hot dog, and the horse ate the hot dog. Then I say to myself, what does it mean horses don't eat meat? How many horses were tested? How big were the horses? How hungry were the horses? How much meat was mixed with how much grain? These are the hidden decisions that go into research, whether it's health, organizational research, whatever it is, but let's stick with health for the moment. And what happens is that research only yields probabilities. That if you did exactly the same thing, which you never can, but let's say, all right, you did exactly the same thing, then you're probably going to get the same results. This is translated for us in textbooks and talks, in the media as absolutes. Anytime you're given an absolute, I want now a little bell to go off and say, well, maybe sometimes. Because things are always changing, and they look different from different perspectives. All right? So there are hidden decisions in each of your lines of work. I don't know just what you do, but I'm suggesting that you think about it, because it's these hidden decisions that are immobilizing us because we think it is the way it should be. And I'm saying the way it should be should depend on what our needs are now. There's an overwhelming tendency to use yesterday's solutions to solve today's problems. All right, so before I tell you my strange ideas, I'm going to appeal to dead white men. All right. Schopenhauer said, all research passes through 3 phases. First, it's ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. Third, it's accepted as self-evident. Einstein said, if at first an idea isn't absurd, then there's no hope for it. All right. I want to share with you an idea that is very simple, but goes against what people have believed for centuries now. And I don't know if you've heard that there's a mind-body problem. And the mind-body problem simply is, how do you get from this fuzzy thing called a thought to the material body? And that has kept everybody guessing for forever. How do you go from a thought to something real? All right. For me, after studying mindfulness and mindlessness for so long, it occurred to me that these are just words. They're just concepts. And so I say, let's put the mind and the body back together. And then it's one. And if it's one, we don't have to worry about how you get from one to the other, because it's all one. So then I do a host of studies where I put the mind in strange places and take measurements from the body. So the first of these studies, and this is the basis, part of the movie that Jennifer Aniston is going to be in about me and my work, and that the BBC just made, we just replicated it with British celebrities. So it's called the Counterclockwise study. Basically what I did, and this is a study I did many years ago, but bring it forward again today because to anchor all of the new studies, I'm going to tell you of several of them. We took old men. They were in their 80s. Now that was when this was run in 1981, 1979, somewhere in there. So that's when 80 was 80. 80 wasn't the new 60. All right, these people were old. And what we were going to do is have half of them live for a week in a house, a retreat, that was retrofitted to 20 years earlier. All right? Everything around them was going to signal the past. They were going to speak in the present tense about the past. Okay? The point is, we're going to have them live as if it was that earlier time. If their minds are fully in that earlier time, then all of them is in that earlier time. Now, the comparison group was going to reminisce for the week. That meant that their minds were here in the present, looking back at the good old days. Right? Everything else was the same. Now, something had happened with the comparison group it was a sexist time for me anyway. I'm driving to the retreat in this bus with these men, and all of a sudden I realized that my male postdocs and graduate students weren't with me. So here I am with these 8 old men and 8 large suitcases. So when we get to the retreat, I decide to change the whole study, and I say, look, you're responsible for your suitcases. I don't care if you unpack it here and take up to your room a shirt at a time, or if you move the suitcase an inch at a time. Now, this was so dramatically different from the way they had been treated by their loving family. I remember, to go back to the beginning, I'm sitting in my office in William James Hall, the adult daughter usually bringing her father. I see them walking down the hallway to come to the office. And I remember, like it was yesterday, saying to myself, what am I doing? He doesn't look as if he's going to live through the day. and I'm going to take them away for a week, where I'm responsible for but I was too deeply into the whole thing, so we went forward. But now what was amazing to me was just with this very simple thing, telling them that they were in charge of their own suitcases, they almost instantly changed. And the change was palpable. All of a sudden, they became different people because they saw that the world that they were now approaching saw them as different people. And as a point in my favor, this was before Google. Now you want to find out what the music and movies and props that you could use from 1979, you just Google it. In 3 seconds, you know it. Back then, it was a much harder task. Okay, so we have the retreat set up. This is our first group. Then we get our experimental group, and the major difference between them is that they're going to have their discussions. Every day they would have 2 discussions about movies and things that they saw the night before, and the experimental group is having those discussions in the present tense. And here are just some of just to bring you all back. I'm responsible now for making all of you younger. Okay, so what we found was that both groups, because of the way we infantilize old people, that both groups here improved in hearing. When did you last hear that somebody's hearing improved? There are certain things that are only supposed to go downhill. Their hearing improved, their memory improved, their strength improved. Over and above that, for the experimental group, you had an increase not just in the things listed there, but in their vision. Now, vision is a perfect example, I think, of the way we take things that are given to us by the medical world and freeze their meaning and act as if they make some sense. I'm going to show you some studies on vision. But we treat vision as if everything there is to see, we should see with the same degree of accuracy. I don't know about you, but if I'm hungry, I see a restaurant sign a lot sooner than when I'm not hungry. And if I want to stay away from you, I'm going to notice you further away. I notice things in colors and colors that I like. And all of this is lost, right? We go, we take an eye test, these letters that are totally meaningless in black and white, and then we decide that's how well we do or we don't see. And then we put on glasses and train our eyes not to be able to see. I'm going to show you a study on vision that'll make you question that procedure. But what we did in this study, in addition to what I've told you, is we took photographs of everybody before we started and then at the end, and gave them to people to evaluate who had no idea what the study was about. And those people in the experimental group who lived as if it was 20 years earlier were rated as looking noticeably younger. They didn't look 50 years old, but they did look younger. Okay, so now let's go fast forward. Oh, let me tell you also, something that, part of the reason that I brought this up to discuss again, even though I had first written about it in the Mindfulness book in 1985, was because at that time I was young and I was unwilling to put myself fully out there, so I didn't describe all the results. Now, these men who looked like they weren't going to live through the day, at the end of this, in the experimental group, 2 of them stopped, there were only 8, 2 of them stopped using their canes, and I was playing football with them. A very big difference. And if you ever get to see, I don't know how long it's taking forever for the movie to be made, but if you get to see the BBC production, you'll see the same findings for these British celebrities. Let's go fast forward. So I do this study with chambermaids. The first thing I do is I ask them, how much exercise do you get? They say they don't get any exercise. That's all they do all day long. But you see, exercise is defined in the States by the Surgeon General, who only gets to exercise after work. So they come to see that exercise is what you do after work. Okay, now, if exercise is so good for you, then these people who are exercising all day long should be healthier than socioeconomic equivalent others. Turns out that they're less healthy. So that's bizarre. Let's put that on hold. Now we do the study. So simple. We divide them into two groups. The experimental group, what we want to do is teach them that their work is exercise. So we say making a bed is like working on this machine at the gym, and so on. Okay, so all we're doing is telling them, hey, you're getting a full workout. And we don't tell the other group. Now we take all sorts of measures, and then we come back a month later. The argument is going to be that this woman on the right, if she sees herself as having been at the gym all day, she will lose weight, even though she's not exercising. Okay. We come back a month later, and we ask people, are you eating any differently? No. Are you working, is she working any harder? No, nobody's working any harder. We think of as many of the things we could think of, we program in to find out, are there any changes? Well, on all of these, there is no change. Everything is the same with one exception. Now they see their work as exercise. What we find is they lost weight. There was a decrease in body mass index. There was a decrease in, and these are significant results, statistically speaking, in waist to hip ratio and a decrease in blood pressure. All as a function of the change in mindset. What we believe is crucial to every aspect of our lives. Okay, so here's the traditional eye chart. So now I want to study vision per se. Now there's something that you probably don't notice about this eye chart, or at least I didn't notice until I started doing this research. You know, these letters get progressively smaller, and you know what they're telling you by that? Soon you're not going to be able to see. Okay, so if that's the message it's giving, what happens when we reverse it? That now the eye chart is telling you, soon you will be able to see. And what happens is people can see what they couldn't see before. Now what we do is, you know, most people believe with the original eye chart, where is it? That about 2/3 of the way down the chart is when you're going to start to have problems seeing. So what we did was start the chart 1/3 of the way down. So 2/3 of the way down is much further down. And again, people could see what they couldn't see before. We hold everything still. Everything is varying. Sometimes your vision is going to be better than other times. Sometimes you're going to want to see more. Sometimes you're going to have slept more. Sometimes the food you're eating is going to affect your vision, and so on and so forth. We hold it still. We hold everything still, but the way to truly succeed is to let everything naturally vary. All right, so basically, now I didn't talk about this. I'm not sure how much time do we have? Does anybody have a couple of more minutes? Okay, I'm going to introduce something that I didn't talk about, just so you understand about this holding things still. So the medical world tells us we have chronic illnesses. Now, when I started this book, I wanted to see, what does chronic mean? How long do you have to have the symptoms for it to be chronic? 24/7? If I have it 3 days out of the week, is that enough? 2 hours out of every... There's no definition. Now, once we realize that we don't have anything all the time in equal measure, then the question becomes, well, what's happening when we don't have it? And therein lies the opportunity for us to affect our health. Let me give you an example, and this is true for all disease, but let's take asthma. Let's say that right now, the medical world, and especially the inhaler, The inhaler leads me to believe that every time I need it, I need the same amount. You never need the same anything. Sometimes you need a little more, sometimes a little less. Okay, it's a multi-billion-dollar business if someone wants to get a graduated inhaler. But putting that aside. So now I'm being mindful, and I say, what is your name? Yeah, Susan. I have asthma, and I notice, when I'm with Susan, I don't need the inhaler. When I'm with Anton, I need the inhaler. Well, the solution is clear, right? Either stop seeing Anton or make my interactions with him more like they are with Susan. Do you understand? As soon as you attend to the variability, sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, that gives rise to the question, why? And then you pursue an answer, you may find it, but if you don't, the search itself is mindful and is good for your health. The world is a social construction. Everything you're doing was at one time a decision. It's important to recognize that because when it doesn't fit, you need to change it. It's very simple, but the simplest changes don't occur to us because of our mindlessness. So let's take this woman, she's 80 years old, and we'll make her 90, comes home with her groceries, puts her groceries down, reaches for her key, opens the door, bends down, picks the... Okay, and she does this whenever she goes shopping. All of a sudden, she comes home, she can't bend down to pick up the groceries. Well, at least in the States, in many places, that would mean she can no longer live alone. Now, if she were my mother, you know what I would do? Right outside her door, I would take... Well, my mother is fancy, so I take a nice piece of wood. But if I couldn't afford it, I'd take a cheap piece of wood, put it right outside the door. She goes shopping, brings her groceries, puts them on the shelf, reaches for the key, opens the door. She never has any problem. A very simple solution. But if we start off thinking everything that is supposed to be as it is, we don't think of these mindful solutions. Anybody who drives a car, mechanically, it's very easy. I could do it myself to make the car seat turn out. If it turned out, then there are people who can't get in a car who'd be able to get in, and then it swivels around and goes forward. It's not hard. But because of that, because it doesn't turn out, what happens is you have people then who are seen as handicapped. Very simple solutions all around. We run from our errors. Our errors are giving us information about our mindfulness. If we reduce it, look at the level of property as with a glue that adheres only for a short period of time, we can change our worlds to make them work better for us. I'm not so tall, and those stupid plates are up there. Now, why do I keep the plates up there? Because that's the way my mother kept the plates. And then if a plate drops, I see myself as clumsy. I'm not clumsy. I'm just a different height from the person who made the decision about how high the shelf should be. Everything is put in place to meet somebody, some group's needs. As long as it meets our needs, that's fine. As soon as it doesn't, we need to make changes. So you were told, if you're not aware, that Australia is doing fabulously well now, especially in comparison to many of the countries in Europe and in the States. Now is an opportunity for you to go forward in a bold way. Okay, so let me end by saying that if we increase our mindfulness, we're going to increase our effectiveness, our health, and well-being, and all will be good. Thank you.